Hi, this is Isabel. How are you today? Just trying to straighten this out. So today the reason I'm online on Facebook is to answer any questions that you have on employment in Switzerland, whether it be work permits, if you have questions on how to get a job in Switzerland, how to start a business in Switzerland. So this is basically for you so that you get to get a little bit more knowledge about the country in Switzerland and what it takes to get a job here. So what I wanted to start saying, basically to give an introduction to this Facebook Live, is really to give you some good news, because I think it's always good to start with positive. So the good news is that unemployment in Switzerland is quite low. I mean, 4.9% right now. So it's a country where there are opportunities for locals and also for internationals. But what I like to say is that it's usually regrouped in big hubs. So the jobs for internationals are usually in Zurich or in Geneva, a little bit in Bern as well. So in the bigger cities. So depending on what you do, and you can ask me maybe more questions around that, but basically it's in the big hubs. So Switzerland has opportunities, there's low unemployment, but it's regrouped in certain hubs, and also you need the right skill set. So depending on what you do, it's mostly for people who have, I would say, who are looking for jobs such as looking for work in supermarkets, or, I would call that basic jobs, like manual jobs, and also for high skilled jobs. So if you're in the in-between, which most people are, so meaning you have some skills, but it's not necessarily basic skills where you're just looking to work in a supermarket, but it's not necessarily high skills like managers, for example, or directors of companies. So you're looking more like the in-between, and that's where you compete also with the locals. So that's something important to know, is really what type of job are you looking for, and what is the market for this job? Is it extremely competitive, and how do you gain the competitive advantage? So there's a study that is released, and I'm happy to share this study with you. It's in French because the link is for the SECO, so it's the administration in Switzerland dealing with the economy. And it actually gives you details if you're the type of person who likes to know a little bit more about the market and data. It gives you a lot of figures, and I'm happy to send this study to you. The link, I put it as an attachment basically under the comments, so you can read about it and understand a little bit more about the Swiss market. But again, it's in French. A lot of information you will find in Switzerland is either in French or in German, based on the local languages. So when you're a foreigner and language spoken is necessarily English, that's a little bit more difficult to find information. And this is where I come in. I'm like the person that's giving you the orientation based on what you're looking for in English. So that's where I position myself and my services, is really to help the expat English speaker to understand a little bit more what you can and cannot do in Switzerland, what are the opportunities, what is the market like. All this information is available, but usually in French or in German, which is not really helpful for the non-speaker of these languages. So really trying to understand the local market with somebody who understands English and can explain things in simple English is very helpful, and is going to be a huge time saver for you when you would be trying to find the information in the local languages. So again, I'm here to answer your questions. I don't see anything yet below. I'm looking. If you have a question on something specific in Switzerland, how to look for a job, work permits, starting a business, becoming independent, this is all related to coming here and do work in Switzerland. One thing you have to understand, there's a difference between European and non-European. So if you're someone who's looking for a job outside of EU, things will be a little bit complicated for you. So meaning that it will be hard for you to get work permits. Basically right now it's really prioritized in terms of who gets the job opportunities. So if you're someone who's coming from a non-EU country, I usually tell people, and I'm very blunt about it, it's basically the United Nations in Geneva, because they don't really They don't really look at where you're coming from. They just basically recruit internationally. So whether you're coming from local or international, it doesn't matter. But it's pretty much the only organization. There's a few other ones like Global Fund in Geneva and places as such that would basically be available for you. So I get a question from Andy. Hi, Andy. I'm English speaking Indian, want to continue my studies in Geneva. Can you please suggest best universities? So this is a good question. Thanks for asking it, Andy. It's going really with the student route. So I think when you come to Switzerland, it's a smart idea actually to come to study because it gives you also a network and an entryway into the country. So there's a lot of good schools actually in Geneva and also outside of Geneva. So if you go all the way up on La Côte, it's called, you know, the Riviera, you have a lot of schools. So for example, in Geneva, the main one is University of Geneva. So that's the school that's quite known in the region. You also have EU Business School where I'm actually teaching. And it's a school for internationals and it provides you with bachelor's and master's. So it really depends also on what kind of specialty you're looking to get a degree in. I tend to favor, but this is me, this is how I built my education, is I tend to favor American degrees because I find that they're more international. So you never know what career will bring you in your life. You may follow a partner or travel. I find that if you have an American education, it's usually recognized very much everywhere you go, the bachelor's and the master's. When you start getting a local degree, and I'm not trying to criticize a degree that you would get inside a country, whether it's Switzerland or France or UK or wherever, it's a little bit less easy to recognize it. So if you then travel or move somewhere else, you will have to get translation and explain a little bit what it means. So I would say the general common understanding of education is bachelor's, master's, PhD. So I would really encourage you to find a school that offers American degrees if you plan to be an international worker and you plan to move around, especially you will have a portable career where your degree will be recognized. So I see more questions here, so I'm just trying to read as I'm talking, which is not easy. So this is the answer to your question is check in Geneva. I have a blog article that I will link up in the comments where I wrote about all the schools in the region and actually in Switzerland, the good universities. So I will post that so you can see what they offer and if it suits you based on what you're looking for. I have a question from Dom Lal, high school and business, HEG, HEO, International Business Management. So he's just answering the question from Andy. Yeah, that's a good idea. UNIG is the one I was talking about. It's University of Geneva. I have a question from somebody here. How to get a job with knowledge of work without a degree? I think about construction, kitchen mounting. So here we are on those jobs I was talking about earlier and some other works that I know and not in what language. I need my papers. What you're not explaining here is what is your nationality? Because again, for those type of work, English, German, French. So anyway, for this type of jobs like construction, if you're looking, for example, assistance to individuals, helping old people, for example, helping, you know, nannies and things like that, they will usually pick local people that have the EU nationality or live already in Switzerland. They're not going to bring someone or make the paperwork for someone that's in another country outside of EU to do those kinds of jobs, because there's so many people already in Europe that would be more than willing to come and do those kinds of jobs that it would be hard. So I can't see here by reading if you're EU or outside of EU, but if you're EU nationality, you do need, for those jobs, it's usually localized because you will deal with, you know, people speaking in the local languages. If you're mounting a kitchen, for example, of course, we're talking about very basic, you know, with the owner of the house and stuff. So you would need to speak or understand the local language. Of course, you would need your paperwork obviously translated, but getting paperwork translated for me, if you're not speaking the language, then what are you going to do when you have the interview? Because even if they receive your file in the local language, Then you have the problem of how do you present yourself in the local language and show that you can communicate. So I think for those jobs, you do need to have a basic understanding of the language, so at least you can have the interview and communicate with the owner of the house if it's construction, or your boss. You know, they would want for those type of jobs either French speakers for Geneva or German speakers for Zurich, who understand a little bit of the basics. I have a question from Manita. Hi Isabel, we are Indians. My husband has been trying to get into the job market here. He speaks only English. He's learning German. He's an SAP consultant. And then I can't read. It has been just plain. He has a B permit. Okay, so you're saying, so if I'm understanding correctly, your husband has a permit. So then it's not a problem of non-EU nationality if he has a permit. So maybe it's just the market is really tight. I'm hearing from even people in IT that the market is quite tight right now. If he's looking in the Swiss German part and his German is basic, maybe that's not good enough. So again, what I wanted to say in this live Facebook is that the skill set for languages in Switzerland is quite high. So if you want to get to those really professional jobs that are very hard to get and very competitive, you need to have very sharp skills. So not only technically, but also verbally. So you need to speak the local languages very well. So if they have the choice between an SAP person who's very good in the local language and someone who barely speaks it, they will prefer, and I've heard this from recruiters, by the way, this is not something I've just made up. They were telling me, recruiters or interim agencies, that the client is actually very picky on this. They want people not only to be good technically, but to also be able to communicate in the team and outside of the team. So it's really going beyond the technical skills. And that's something that's very hard to understand when you come from a country where English is the main language. So for example, and even some countries, you know, like India, I mean, if you speak English, you can get anywhere. But here, the local languages are extremely important. And that's what I keep repeating in all my communication. It's not a country where you can get by with minimum language skills. And that's something that's hard to take into account in a career, because it takes a huge growing learning curve for most people, where you had a great career in your country, you were a specialist, you did very well, you come to Switzerland and you have this big hurdle because your language skills are limited. So in order to compete in this arena, whether it's in IT or any other professions, you really need to develop your language skills, whether it be French if you target Geneva, or maybe German if you target Zurich. That said, there's exceptions to that. Again, the international organizations, UN, sometimes if you have very good English, but maybe you're basic on other languages, depending on the work that you do. For example, if you work with your country of origin as a liaison, for example, they might be happy if you just speak your country of origin language and English. But if you target the local market and the private sector in your local market, language becomes very important. And even if you think, okay, I'm just going to speak French maybe 10% of the time, it's still, they want someone who can present well, who can speak the local language. So they, you know, there's this, again, this need to be quite skilled. So that's something also I want to mention in this live Facebook. If you target the Swiss market, you need to upgrade your skills. You're competing with the best of the best. Everyone wants to work in Switzerland. The salaries are high. The quality of life is wonderful. So people want to come here. So the competition is fierce, and they want the best. You know, companies can afford to say, I want the best. So between someone who speaks so-so a language and someone who's very good, you know, the answer is very simple. So I have a question from Wendy. What are your thoughts on sending CV direct to contacts at companies rather than applying directly to jobs? My background doesn't have many jobs advertised, and here on B permit. Yes, this is very common. We're on a small market. In the end, in Switzerland, it's a small country compared to maybe the US, for example, or other countries. So you're dealing, and again, there's only some hubs where you can use English, you know, have an English speaking job, so to say. So you really need to go niche. And sometimes there's not a lot of job openings in your niche. You have maybe once a week and everyone is going for it. So you need to strategize a little bit more how you're going to target. And the best way to do that is, as you say, to go direct. But you need to be very organized in that, you know, which companies, what is the name of the individual I'm targeting. So there's research that takes into account. You need to have a plan on what you're going to say and why, and understand the organization needs, which usually people don't do. They just send an application and they don't really understand what the company needs. So what I would advise is really to focus on what does the organization need and how do I fit in that? What type of pain am I fixing for this company, or could I fix for this company? So it's really being niche and being very focused in your message so that you come, in the top of the pile, basically. So that's what I would recommend. Another question from Dom. I agree, foreigners need to learn at least one of the national Swedish languages to find a job. This is an absolute prerequisite. Yes, absolutely. And again, this is very specific to Switzerland. If you were in other countries, you could probably get by, but this is not a country where you can get by, unfortunately, because I think for different reasons, again, because of the fact that there's a high skill set that's required to work here, and also it's cultural. People want individuals who come from abroad to adapt to the local culture. So speaking the language is a way of showing that you're adapting and you're becoming a little bit more Swiss in a way. So that's also a selection process, that Switzerland doesn't want anyone to work on their territories. They want people who are quite motivated, want to stay here and understand the local culture. So I explain this also in my blog and my articles. It's not something where you can just come work and not really understand the local language. So again, it's something that you have to understand when you're moving, when you're an expat and you're traveling, you're moving to a different countries, trying to understand their point of view, how they function, and see if that suits you. I mean, again, Switzerland may not be a country where you'd be happy, depending on what you want to do, because it's not suiting maybe your lifestyle or what you want to do, with your career. Again, the importance on the local language being so high, is it really the next logical career step for you? Because maybe you have a great career speaking English in your country right now, or you could have great opportunities. I always tell people there's also opportunities in the UK. There's other countries also in Europe that are quite international and where speaking English would be considered enough and where you could have a great career. But Switzerland is not one of them, so the language skill set there is a little bit different. So you have to understand, maybe if you're looking for the next career step for you, I wouldn't limit it to one country. I would really look at broadly, what are the opportunities in Europe? And some countries do offer very competitive salaries. So I think sometimes people are a little bit narrow-minded. They think about, I want to come to Switzerland, and for different reasons, and we know those reasons. I've just mentioned them earlier. But there's also other countries that may be more suited for your type of profile, where you could get a better chance, because what I hate to see sometimes with individuals is that they would be willing to work, something extremely lower than what they were doing before, just to work in this area. And I mentioned this area because it's not just Switzerland. People tend to like also the French frontier area as well. So again, sometimes putting location first, I think, would be a mistake in a career move, because you're really eliminating a lot of other opportunities. And if you look at the world broadly and you're an international expat, there's many places that may be more suited for what you're looking for. So it's something also to consider. I'm trying to see if there's more questions after Dom here. So yeah, I think this is a very important message, is to really understand where you're based right now, what is it that you're trying to do with your career, and see if Switzerland is the answer, because it may not be. Then there's also the question of following a partner, which is another reason. And then of course you have to, so to say, look for a job locally. That limits your scope a little bit, and then that's another strategy. But I think if you're not necessarily in a situation where you have to work in Switzerland, meaning maybe you're in another country and you can go abroad, I wouldn't limit it. I would count Switzerland as part of the target countries, but I wouldn't limit it to Switzerland, because it will be tough to get in if you're not in already. Once you're in, once you're in the country and you start working here, you have a network and people know you and recognize you, it becomes easier, because you're set up in the country, people start contacting you, and you have opportunities that come your way. But when you're outside of the country right now, it's a little bit harder to come because there's already a lot of people here that are looking for the similar things and have the network and have the permit and are already settled. So it's really, if you really want to come to Switzerland, again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I tell people that want to find a job in Switzerland is to really make it a goal and to really make all the efforts to reach that goal, meaning you have to give it 110%. You know, if it's a permit issue, you can fix it. You know, there's always ways. What I've found in my journeys, that there's always ways to get where you want to be in terms of career, as long as you follow it as a project. So if you say, I want to work in Switzerland, okay, what do I need to do? You know, so I need to improve the languages, I need to get a work permit, I need to find an employer. So you just make it like a checklist and you tackle each one of them in order. And then that's how I did it to settle my own independent consultancy. I just went at it as a project and say, what are the steps that I need to take in order, because there's always an order, especially in Switzerland, to get things. And then once you start, you know, going down your checklist, you know, things will start taking shape, but it takes a little bit of time. So I have a question, I agree, okay, how long does it take, according to your experience, in average, to find a job for a senior professional on the Swiss market when you speak two national languages? Okay, so I don't want to give a science type of answer, because there's no such thing as, there's no application that tells you if you have this and that, you get, you know, a job in 2 weeks. It really depends how much energy you put in your search, meaning if you're not working right now, do you have an agenda, and every day you have a plan of what you're trying to achieve every day, and you keep accountability and results. In my online package, by the way, I do have that included, like following up on your application, see where you stand, etc. So it's really depending. I have someone that's joining in right now, Cecile. She says depends on sector and function. It's partially true. I mean, if you're in a sector that's highly competitive and you have a lot of applications, and immediately I'm thinking the luxury sector, the watch sector, etc. They get a lot of applications. Probably takes a little bit longer than if you reach out for a sector that's a little bit less sexy, so to say, and maybe they get a bit less applications. I always tell people, go for jobs where they're not necessarily so well branded. So for example, if you're looking for a job in the luxury sector, you know it attracts everybody and they have massive competition. When I was looking for a job a few years back, I went for a small NGO that didn't have a nice website. The job description wasn't so sexy, but it sounded somewhat interesting. And the competition was very low. I learned afterwards that we were only a few people to compete for the job, because again, it wasn't so visible and attractive. So I think that's a way maybe to find a position that basically it's looking at what other people wouldn't see. That's how I look at job opportunities. So you know everyone is going to look at Rolex, you know everyone is going to look at P&G. And I'm not saying these places, they're great places, and I think it'd be great to work there, but sometimes when you don't have the perfect profile to work there, it's going to be tough to get in. So my strategy that I teach people is to go for places that have less visibility, less attraction, and therefore you will have less competition and you can get in easier. And then once you're in a job in Switzerland, it's easier to go for those other places. But you have to start somewhere, and it's a way of starting somewhere. So I have Arsad who says, I'm interested in the NGO sector. Great. Yeah, it's recruiting in Geneva. I mean, you have positions depending, but again, you need, for the NGO sector, you need to have also a proper background. So they like to have people who have studied maybe political science or international studies, international economics. They want people who understand also how it works, and that's also a transition. Sometimes people have worked their entire careers in private sector, so they're still in a private sector thinking, you know, in terms of how things work. And trust me, I've been through that transition. It's not that easy. It's a completely different world. Here you're talking about funding and partners and dealing with different people, etc., that have different stakes in the NGO world. So it gets a little bit tricky sometimes to make that transition. You need to prepare yourself if you want to work there. I lost track of the question. How do you recommend following up on CVs sent to job applications, from Wendy? Well, I have a tracker in my package, for example, where you write down, you know, where you sent your application. And then it really depends. Do you have a name, for example? Some companies will give you the name of a person, even the email. Usually agencies will do that for you when you apply via an agency, so it's easier to follow up if you work through an agency because you already have a contact. If it's a big company, chances are it went through the online process and all you get is an email saying thank you for applying, but you have no person to contact, so it gets a little bit harder to follow up. So you can do it both two ways. You can try to find a contact on LinkedIn, but chances are, again, it's not going to be the right person, or you're going to be just moved around and not getting anywhere. So I find for large organizations, you can't really do follow-up unless you know someone specifically there or you're introduced by somebody. You can do it with small organizations or interim agencies because usually you will have a contact. So you have to adapt your strategy with what you have basically to work with, and you have different resources. Everyone has different resources. If you're new to Switzerland or you're moving to Switzerland, technically you have zero resources because you don't know anybody there. You're coming really fresh. If you're already in Switzerland, you have a few people, and then it's just working through that network in an organic way to try to get somewhere. And that's also a little bit of technique there. It takes a lot of effort. So I also teach that with my online program, how to deal with the network and so forth. And I'm also providing contacts so that you have an entryway into the country, which in my view in Switzerland is a necessity. I mean, I had myself the chance to have an entryway into the country in my career. I don't think I would have been able to come if I didn't have that. And I'm very conscious of that. That's why I think the introduction part is quite important, and that's something most people don't have. How to get into it as intern volunteer so that I can get into that organization, get into the organization. So you're talking about, I suppose, I'm not sure if you're talking private or not-for-profit. Yes, interning or volunteering is a way to get in, but there's a requirement for that. First is that they have a need. Sometimes companies don't have a need, and that they will take you as an intern, and there's usually rules to enter as an intern. Usually it means that they have a program for internships. Companies tend now to be a little bit more structured around internships, because it used to be where anyone would just apply and people would think if I come in as an intern, I have my chance. But companies now try to be more ethical as well in terms of internship. They don't want to abuse people, so they're very clear usually that you have to be a student or recent graduate to come as an intern. So if you're not a recent college graduate, technically they won't take you. That's what you will read on their policies most of the time. And also you have to be careful. So when you intern or you volunteer, I tend to work with people very individually on that, depending on their resume and what they're trying to achieve, because it could be good for someone who has no experience and they need to have a little bit something on the resume, but it could also be hurtful for you if, for example, you've worked already, you're more seasoned, I call it professional, then people will wonder why you're going for internships and volunteering. It could be suspicious, like you're not finding work. And it could also make you waste time. I mean, you're not getting paid during that whole time, and you're not necessarily positioning yourself in the right way. So it's not a question of marketing. It's what is going to give you the best marketing for your profile. So for example, if you're a young student, you just graduate, and you need experience, maybe staying 2 to 6 months with an organization could be good for you, because you learn technique, method, you get also a network, and that will lead you to the next opportunity. Hopefully that's a paid one. Sometimes you need to do a few internships first, so that's a good strategy. But if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're interning, probably it's not going to send the right message. So I tend to be very careful with how you deal with volunteering and internships. It has to make sense in your profile. So that was the answer to the question. How can one volunteer in an NGO or an organization? Asks Anita. Hi, Anita. There's a process. Usually organizations will post it. They will have internship programs you apply to, and I will post the link here to find internships. And volunteering is also something NGOs will post, and there's a bunch of links I've just published under a blog article, and you can find pretty much volunteering or internships type of opportunities, but they will tell you what the requirements are, and usually you need to be a student or a recent graduate. So that's, and for volunteering, sometimes they can be a little bit more open, especially the smaller organizations, because they don't have the funds necessarily to employ somebody, so they will give you a volunteering contract. Again, what I would recommend is to keep it short. If you're going to give your time to somebody for free, usually it's an exchange of skills and network and so forth. It can work well if you limit it in time. So you can have in your plan, in your career, to say, okay, now it would be good for me to volunteer for a couple of months, but you don't want that to last too long, because then, you know, no one wants to work for free for too long. Then it's also degrading a little bit your profile. If people say, well, you know, this person has been working for free for months and months, why should I pay you now? So it's a little bit, you have to think about the message you're sending when you make choices in your career. So a new question I have, political science degree, MBA, MSc in international management from Swiss. Okay, and I guess the question is, you want to get now volunteering or an internship? Well, typically if you have an MBA, I'm not sure from which school, but the schools where you got your MBA or your master's will help you get into a company somewhere as an intern. That's what the career department will do. So it depends on the school and how much they will do for you in terms of getting you into the working world. And providing, usually they will also give you assistance with internships. I will post also the links here on how to find internships on boards on the internet. But yeah, you do need to practice at some point. I think degrees are very good because they position you at a certain level. But without experience, I think companies now also realizing, well, it's great to have degrees. That's why you see all these articles right now. I don't know if you notice about, do I need a degree? Is a degree helpful? Because companies now are getting to the stage where they say, we want doers. We want people who can think straight, who can do things. And sometimes what I find with people that are just on education is that they've learned, they were very good scholars, so they went to school and they got a degree, but they can't necessarily put things together. So if you're in a company and your boss asks you to do certain things and you look at them and you're like, I don't know how to do it, you're making them waste their time. So I find that the most precious thing, and this is coming from someone who has a business, I find that the most precious thing you can offer to a boss or a job is really to be someone that can bring solutions to problems. So they want people who are doers, who can go and fix things, fix problems easily. So you're someone who can think quickly on their feet and say, oh, okay, this database is not working. That's no problem. I'll use this other one. Or, oh, you have a problem with this client. It's okay. I'll be able to talk to this person on the phone and get it resolved. So they're looking for people who can find solutions. That's why companies love people who are entrepreneurs or who have some kind of entrepreneurship skills, because usually they're very, they think straight on their feet. People who are entrepreneurs, they tend to know how to do things with very little. So they're very good for companies, and companies are looking for those people. I call that intrapreneurs. So you're looking into a company, but you're going to develop your team or your job, and those are the kind of skills that employers want. They want people who are quick on their feet, can be intrapreneurs, understand how to talk to people and get things resolved. The degree becomes more and more secondary because everyone has a degree nowadays, and I'm not exaggerating. I think a lot of people now go for bachelor's, master's, PhDs. I even see a lot of PhDs who are looking for jobs. So they think, well, I have a degree, so I should get a job. But unfortunately, that's not what the recruiter, employer will look at. They'll look at, well, what can you do for me, you know, and how much are you willing to put in my organization? How many problems can you resolve for me? This is what a company is looking for. So really the degree in itself won't get you the job, but the passion to solve a certain problem will get you the job. So if you find your niche, let's say you've identified, these are the international organizations or the NGOs I'm interested in, or private sector, what are their problems? What are they talking about in the press or online, the issues that they're faced with, and how can I get in and solve some of these issues for them in my field? So if you're an MBA, technically you're broad, you understand a little bit of everything, so you will have to get in as a specialist because most jobs are specialized. So what is the thing that interests you? Is it more marketing? You know, you want to get people to buy the services? Is it more finance? You like numbers? You have to define. And sometimes I'm not sure about which program you followed in your master's or your education, but I find that integrating maybe in the degree, and I'm not sure if it's done, the career part is very important, because the degree in itself is just a degree, but it's what you do with it. Where are you taking this degree? You know, what is it going to do for an employer? The employer doesn't care about your degree. That's you. You're happy you've got the MBA. You're proud of yourself. Your parents are proud. Your friends are proud. But the employer doesn't care. The employer wants you to solve their problems and bring them value. So that's what you need to think about when you're applying for a job, is leave aside your degrees, your achievements, what you've done before, but what are you doing for this particular person you're applying to get their job? What can you do for them? What problem can you solve? How much money can you bring them if you're looking at business development? So, and it's something also that you learn through experience, and I have experience now. I think I'm, you know, I've worked for a few years, considering I've worked in the US, in France, and in Switzerland, and that's something I've observed. It's really, companies don't care so much about your degrees, and it took me a long time to get to that conclusion. But companies don't care about your degrees. They want you to bring solutions to their problems. So that's what you should be focused on. So I'm trying to move a little bit forward now. For UN Young Professional Program, it's open to people below 32 years old. Applications are open until August. So thank you, Cecile, for mentioning that for the group. I think this will be helpful. So for people who don't know, the UN Young Professional Program is very good. The only thing is that you need to be under 32, so that's why I'm saying those kinds of programs are usually targeted at the younger professionals. But if you want to get into the international organizations, it's very good for you, because you can get in and really learn everything. As a young professional, you'll be taught everything about how this organization works, what skills you need, and also you get different types of departments, so you learn from different type of people, and it's usually your entryway, and after that you can apply internally to move forward in your career. But it's a very good program, and I would really encourage people who want to get into the UN or international organizations to go through these young programs, and other organizations have them as well, not just the UN, but this is for the UN one. Thanks, Cecile, for mentioning that. Our study is saying still have trouble to get in. It's very competitive. The young program at the UN is very competitive. They only pick a few people, handpick a few people. So that's why you can't just focus on that one. I think you have to broaden, you know, look at the NGOs, look at, you know, whether volunteering or interning could be a good thing. I had a client who volunteered, who interned for a small NGO. She had an excellent profile, very good profile, and she stayed there for about 5 or 6 months, and then after that she was able to get other positions. So it's really, sometimes it could be a good booster to do an internship somewhere, but I would do it more on an open application. Just send your, you know, spontaneous application and just explain that you're looking for an internship. If you're still in that range below 32, I think it would be good. Okay, Dom is saying, which are the best channels to look for a job in Switzerland? Job boards, headhunters, companies, recruiters, job fairs, networks. Which are the job boards you would recommend? So I would say everything. So there's not one approach fits it all, where you say, okay, you know, I'm just going to go for job boards, or I'm just going to go for headhunters. This won't work. You need to have your eyes and your ears all open and do a little bit of everything, because it really depends. For some people, and I've been doing enough coaching now, career coaching, that I know that it's different for everybody. Some people will say, well, for me, spontaneous applications has worked all the time. So that's one person. Another person, they'll say, it's never worked for me. It's always headhunters, or it's always job boards. Or so I find that you have to do a little bit of everything to multiply the chances of finding a job. So for example, if you're looking for a job to enter an international organization, look at job boards, see what type of applications you can send, look at headhunters that would be connected to international organizations. So it's really doing a mix of those things that will get you the job. I have a blog article where I posted a lot of links, so I will add this in the comments, and you can look through and see you know, which headhunters, which companies, which job boards. You can find that in my blog article I will post. So it will give you some resources to start. So Arsad said, I have worked with Danish Red Cross as admin and finance manager for 4 years. Okay, so I guess that's explaining a little bit more the profile. Yeah, so if you have some experience with the Red Cross, that's very good. You just have to go through the process. I think most people, when they apply, they think, well, I'm not getting any results. It could be a mix of reasons as well. Maybe they're not positioned in their resume. Resume is a marketing tool. I keep repeating that everywhere. So people tend to be a little bit linear in their resume. I've done this, I've done that, now I'm looking for this. No one wants to read that, just the same way as no one cares about your degree. So you have to make it a little bit interesting for the employer. So if I'm an employer, I want to see someone who says, you know, who starts with their profile saying something interesting, you know, I have so many years of experience and this is where I come in, and make their resume a little bit interesting as well. So that's writing skills for your resume. And that's a whole skill set in itself. Some people are very good at it naturally because they're good writers. Other people, they struggle a little bit with it. I have clients, after half an hour, they get the resume straight. And other clients, it takes them a lot of sessions because it's just not natural for them and they just don't see how things should articulate. It's a special mindset as well. When you've worked, as myself, in HR for many years, you are looking for certain things. So I know how recruiters function. I know what type of things they want to see. But unfortunately, people who are applicants don't see the same way. So you have two people that are thinking differently. The recruiter wants certain things and the employee or future employee is not giving them what they want. So it creates a little bit of sometimes mismatch. And it's unfortunate. So you have to understand really to think like a recruiter. What are the things that my resume should say that's interesting, that would catch the attention? So Anita is saying, like, provide your expertise free for some time or something like try and hire. How do you proceed? Well, it depends. If you're freelance, for example, providing expertise for free, maybe if it's a future client, but I don't think you're in that freelance thing. Well, try and hire is something you would have to negotiate with an employer, and that's something you would do via the network, for example. So if you were to get an informal interview with somebody and you could see they have needs, but they're just not necessarily putting it as a job, you could say, look, you know, I understand how this works. I could do this piece for you. The only thing is that you have to be careful that people don't use you, that they just don't take the thing that's free and then say, okay, you know, now I don't need you. I've seen people, for example, in marketing that had an issue with this, even in the application process, where all of a sudden they're asked to create a huge strategy for them, the employer, and so forth, and then they don't get called back. So it's always, especially if you're in functional jobs, functional roles like marketing and all that, you have to be careful that people don't abuse you. So I think providing the thing for free for an employer is a little bit difficult. Either you volunteer for this employer and that's something that you're ready to do just to get experience. It really depends how much experience you have. Some people, they have a lot of experience. They shouldn't be volunteering to get a job because they have enough to prove that they can get a job. So again, I would have to look at your profile basically and see what makes sense. Again, it could be more a waste of time for you. KCI is saying, would online courses improve chances to find a job? That's a good question. I'm glad someone raised the point of online courses because there's a lot of choice now. I'm just testing right now LinkedIn Learning, which is really interesting. There's a lot of information out there. Education is always a plus, but again, it's the same with the MBA. It's really good, but then what do you do with it? You know, it's really what you want to make your career. Again, knowing what I just said, that employers are more concerned about what can you do for me and what problems can you solve. Career is more something you do, like online courses, usually it's more for yourself. For example, I'm someone who always wants to learn. It's part of my DNA. I think I'm just going to be like this forever. So I'm always taking courses online, offline, in schools, whatever. But that's how I am. But that's more for me. I'm not expecting to get payback on it necessarily. It could be that you get payback if the skills that you have are really high in demand. So right now, programmers, Anyone that's doing online work right now, software engineers, all that, they get paid very well for their training, and that's great for them. But it's not necessarily the case. Some people are extremely well trained. They have done a lot of courses, online and offline. But if it's not the market need, for example, if you love psychology and you have a PhD in psychology and you've done all the online courses, but no one is really interested. And I can think of my area, for example, which is more coaching. You have so many people that are ICF coaches, they've done the NLP, they've done everything, but it doesn't necessarily equate that they're such high value because there's so many people that have the same skills. So you have to see with your area, your field, you know, is it really something that's going to make a huge difference, or is there already so many people with online degrees and everything that really you'll just be still one amongst the other? It could be good also to add material to your speech. So if you've done some online courses, it gives you a little bit of material. So when you have the interview, you can say, yeah, this is the latest trends, etc. So online courses is good also to maintain your skills, because if you've done a college degree a long time ago, it keeps you a little bit aware of what's going on in your field, especially in technical fields. Andrea is asking where to look for a job in purchasing around Geneva. Well, that's a question of same thing, looking at job boards, looking at the links that I will provide in my blog to see what vacancies are out there. When you do a search, you see a little bit the vacancies and see where you find purchasing. So I would do it broad in the whole area, not just Geneva, but in Canton Vaud also, and try to see what are all the jobs out there. So you just, it's very easy. You just type www.indeed.com. Or also there's Neuville, N-E-U-V, and that's also in my blog article. You just type purchasing Geneva, purchasing Lausanne, and you can find all the jobs there. That just gives you an idea of the market. Dom is saying this is where the Swiss higher education system is excellent. Students are used to gain hands-on experience in parallel with their studies. Yes. That's true. I mean, experience here is very valued, more than college degrees. People like to see what you can do, you know, if you have the practical experience. So the sooner you can have some type of program where you also learn on the ground, you know, that's very helpful. Ingrid is saying, do you have any tips for non-EU, non-Swiss people looking for a job in Switzerland in regards to work permit? Oh, thanks Ingrid for asking the question. I just started the live Facebook on that about job work permits. So really, if you're non-EU, you're limited. You're limited to the UN and international organizations that have certain agreements with the government where they can hire broadly. So they usually have, it's called immunities and privileges, to be quite detailed there. I'm not a lawyer, but I understand enough about it because I've worked on it. So basically, you need to focus only on these organizations to find a job. Really, I think it would be a waste of time to apply to the private sector or to organizations who are working with the Swiss law, because they're not going to invest the time and money to get you a work permit. So it's unfortunate, but you know, better you know it and you move forward on it, because if you start spending your time applying and you don't hear back, it's frustrating. And really, companies now can't afford, and I can tell you how much it costs because I've been there on the other side where I had to apply for work permits for non-EU, and it's about 10,000 Swiss francs just to work with a lawyer and get the process for the application. You can also do it on your own as an employer, but it's also a lot of time that you have to write. You have to get approvals from different offices in Switzerland, such as the unemployment office, because you have to prove as an employer that you can't find anyone else that can do the job. So really, unless you're some super Einstein, you know, you just made a whole business model, or you just created the new, you know, you're like Elon Musk of Switzerland, you're super duper special. Companies now are not going for admins or even professionals jobs. They're not going to do a full application for you. It's unfortunate, but it's more, it's too much hassle basically. So sometimes if you work, again, if you're in a startup and you're very specialized in your field and you work in a certain type of startup, your partners might do the application for you. So if I'm from China or I'm from Australia, but I'm working on a specific project in a startup in Switzerland, I will get the work permit probably, because someone will get me there because they need my skills. So again, we're on very specific, usually highly technical, innovative fields. But for people who are looking for the corporate jobs, I think it would be silly to say that you have a chance. However, if you're transitioning with your company, that's another story. So if you're in a country where your company is broad and is international, let's say P&G or you know, those big multinationals, I think it would probably be easier to say, let's try to apply via my company in Switzerland if they have a vacancy there. But it takes two things. That means your company has an office in Switzerland, which is not always the case, and your company would need to do it for you. They need an expat, you know, basically positioned there. So it would take a lot of different things to happen for you to have this opportunity. But the easiest way is really to apply for the EU, I mean for the UN, or for big international organizations like the CERN. I believe you can also get in worldly. So just focus on these organizations and see what type of skills you would have that would suit them to apply. That's really your chance. Or also, I forgot another option, is go at it as the independent worker or create a business. But that takes some investment coming to the country, because you can't really have credibility if you're based in another country. So you would have to do the business plan and show that you have clients. So it would take already some type of work with the locals to get that in place, but that's also an option. And that's something I'm happy to discuss maybe offline with people who are interested in that route, the creation of business route to come as a non-EU. It's a whole different process, but it's one way of coming to Switzerland, but you need to have something concrete in place, obviously. So I have a question from Leng Kawi. How can without any to find a job? I'm not sure I understand your question. You maybe have to rephrase it. Next question, for foreign people, I suppose, seeking a job in Switzerland, do you have the average of salaries? Yes, I believe I had even posted on that recently on my page here about salaries in Switzerland, depending on your field of study and, you know, the type of jobs. It really depends, because there's not a minimum wage in Switzerland. So really salaries can be everything. But I would say probably average is 80 to 90,000 Swiss francs a year. You know, that's for most professional jobs, I would say. Sometimes a little bit lower if you work for an NGO that's just starting out and doesn't have a lot of funding, or for other type of industries, they may pay you a little bit lower. And then if you're a more senior seasoned professional, you would get more than that. But that's, I would say, average. So I hope I answered the question. Then I have a question, I'm not sure. Okay. I think I'm on the questions right now. I'm up to date. So I'm trying here. So yeah, so to summarize, basically, we talked about language skills. We talked about non-EU, really focus on international organizations that have a possibility to hire broadly is easier, or to start business. That's your two only options. There's not a third one. And for salaries, really understand that it's very broad. So it's basically what you're willing to accept. But you have to understand a little bit for your industry, for the city also you're going to, because if you're going to Zurich or you're going to Bern, it's not going to be the same salaries as Geneva. It's a different location, different things. So really understand where you're going and try to do your research on the salary where you're going, so that you know what you're talking about. I think also to add to your credibility when you're a foreigner is to show that you understand the market. So if you come to the recruiter with some knowledge, you have less chances of having a lower offer or to be played with, so to say, than if you don't understand the market. So I have a question here. Thanks for your comment. Any specific tips to improve a resume? What can catch a recruiter's attention, or where to focus on the CV? Also tips for the cover letter. So this is a broad question. I think it really, if you want to be efficient nowadays and be different, it really takes a lot of tailoring. So you can't just have the general, even the general comments I put in my video. So I have a video I built on that, on the CV and cover letter. And it's actually the video that I have on my website as well under the free tutorial, where it's basically giving you the structure of the resume, the structure of the cover letter. That's the basics, but that's still not good enough. I think even if you have those basic things, you have a proper tools, but you're not differentiating yourself. And the differentiation will come from working on your own profile. So it will come from knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, and trying to make the resume shine with your skills on it. So it's a little bit of skills assessment. It's a little bit of doing your branding. So it's hard to tell from just a question what would be good for you, for example. So it's really based on your experience. If you want, I'll put also the link to this video where you can really, because I don't want to get into details here, I don't have time, but it gives you at least the structure of the resume and the structure of the cover letter, so that at least you have something to work with, knowing it's the base and it's the minimum. But if you want to be super efficient and differentiate yourself from the competition, you need to really think a little bit more. You need to say, okay, what are the terms I should put in? So one thing that you need to understand now also with the web is keywords. So people usually don't build their resume around keywords. They build their resume, again, they're just putting information right next to the other. You need to understand about how keywords work with Google so that your resume comes up. If people do a search on Google, more and more recruiters now are trained on sourcing. So they will look for people based on keywords. So if you're not using the web, you're not visible by these recruiters that are doing some keyword searches. So it's not just now, it used to be where you would just do a CV and a resume and a cover letter and just apply online and so forth. Now you have all these different tools that recruiters are using that are new and apps and all that. So you need to understand how to be present there. And it's going way beyond a resume and a cover letter. It's really building also your profile online, in LinkedIn, etc. This is where recruiters are going to be looking for you. So again, it's just the basics, having a good resume and cover letter, but then you will need to build your strategy around that. That's a little bit more going beyond the basics. So I have a question from Stephanie. I won't try to pronounce the last name. How can I sell myself better? What are recruiters looking for and what are the no-goes? Well, you know, it's interesting, your question. It's a little bit as if you were saying, what are men looking for and what are the no-goes? It really depends because everyone is very different. So you could have general things, as I was explaining earlier, where I was explaining some of the things that recruiters would want to see in an individual. So forget about your degree. It's not necessarily going to be the selling point because a lot of people have degrees, but think about how can you solve their pains and their problems. So really the way to basically have a good mark with a recruiter or an employer is to understand where they're coming from. It's really basic psychology. Is to understand. So to sell yourself better, you need to understand who you're trying to sell to better. So most people, when they're sending applications, they just do a blank cover of, okay, let me just send everywhere, and maybe they change a few words and so forth. But I think now if you want to differentiate yourself, you need to go a step further. You need to really understand, okay, for this particular company, you know what, they were just purchased. So I need to think about that when I do my cover letter. I just did that with a client. When they sent me the email, I just said, well, how can you not mention that this company now is going through a huge fusion and acquisition? I mean, that's a huge thing, and you can really differentiate yourself by showing you know about it. I mean, that would be the worst thing, is that a company has just been purchased or is actually laying off people, and you're not even aware of it. So you need to read a little bit about this company that you're targeting. So really, knowledge is power. The more you know about this company and their pains and what problems they're trying to solve and what skill set, and you can find that by looking at the jobs they're recruiting, that's where you can position yourself. So if it's a techie company, for example, of course you want to be someone that's interested in tech. If it's the luxury sector and you can't even think about what brands are selling luxury bags, probably you're not the best person for them. So it's just, for me, it's common sense, is that you will probably be picked by a company where you think alike or where you have similarities. And I've made that mistake before myself, where I would apply because they had a job opening, but I had nothing to do with the company. I had no similar values. I didn't really understand what they were doing necessarily thoughtfully. So it's really, but that I'm talking about when I was really young and just starting applying. But now with more maturity, I realize how important it is for success. And that's both for the employer and the employee. You need common values and you need to have common things that you're interested in. Otherwise, it's not going to last very long. You know, if you work for a company that's again in luxury, but you really don't like luxury, you think it's a waste of money, and you think like, why should I spend so much on a product? Probably you're not going to be happy there in the long run. So it's really understanding, would you be happy in that company? And also think about, if your job disappears, you know, you want to position yourself where you like so much the company that you can stay there, maybe do something different. If you're only there for that particular job, but you don't really like what the company is doing, probably you won't stay there very long. So it's really thinking also about long term. So that would also help you to sell yourself, is really having common things with the company. So don't think about it as, I need to apply as much as I can, even though that could be something based on unemployment rules, and that's another story. But not so much about how many applications can I send to get a job, but more about, let me only send a few, but they're very targeted and I know I'd be very good for this company. So that's how you can sell yourself much better. And you can sell yourself everywhere. Some companies are just not cut for you because of their values, because of where they're positioned with their product, because of the type of skills they're looking for. So as I like to say, we're not every company's employee, and that's fine. That's part of selection. Selection goes both ways, and just like you're not every company's employee, probably they're not right for you either. So it's really positioning yourself for the places that make sense for you, that will appreciate you, and where you have a chance of growing with them. And that way you already saved yourself probably the big first part of the interview process, because you know you're the right person. So then the interview will just be easy and go through it easily. So that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it helped, because I do see now more and more this dynamic of selling yourself. I mean, it's becoming important. That's why branding is becoming important, and marketing, and companies realize it as well. So they're also investing in those things. They also want to be attractive for employees. But I think as attractive as you try to be, you need to have some values there. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words and colors on a resume or a website. So it's really, the branding is more about what you represent and what you're passionate about on both ends. And then people will find that the recruitment process is very much easier, because people will find each other, you know, based on their values. So you just saved yourself a lot of time and effort, as opposed to trying to be something else. So that would be my recommendation. Work on your branding, work on what you're good at, what do you represent, build your tools, you know, your LinkedIn, your resume, and then you will start attracting like-minded companies. It just works automatically, you know, people will find you. So it's a little bit more work from the front end, but it will bring you much more benefits afterwards. And that's part of what I work on as well, is building this whole branding and building this message that will make you come out of the crowd, you know, and be visible. Because in the end, everyone is running after the same thing nowadays. It's becoming more visible because there's so many people out there looking for the same things, doing the same things. Everyone wants visibility, but visibility only works if you're sincere, if you have the right message and you have credibility. And that's something that also takes time to build the credibility. So I hope this was helpful. I'm just trying to see, time runs when you're having fun. I didn't realize it was already 1:30. I guess lots of questions today. And I suppose you enjoy doing this thing with the questions and answers. So maybe I will do another one, because a lot of people couldn't come today. They had other things going on, but they were quite interested in the concept. So I will probably repeat this type of event so that people have a chance to see me live, see what I look like, see what I sound like. I think it's always important. And get some basic information on Switzerland and the job search process here, which is not easy for non-French or Swiss German speakers to understand, you know, what's going on. So so hopefully do that in the fall sometime. So I will probably bring a close to this live Facebook now, unless I have a last minute question. I'm looking online. I don't see anything after Stephanie here. Just trying to move. No, nothing there. If you get on this Facebook Live, maybe later today, and you're like, oops, I had a big question I didn't ask, you can always post it and I'll answer it. You know, type the answer. Kesia is saying, this was great, thank you. Anita is saying, thank you for your insights today. Well, I hope this was helpful. I'll post all the things I said in the comment section so that you can read through the blog where you have the links to the platforms where you can find jobs, and I'll go through my blog because I did give a lot of information, but it's just a little bit in the archives of the blog, or you have to scroll down, and people don't visit my blog regularly so they don't read it, but it's there, it's in the blog section, so lots of information. So I will do that now and wish you a very happy weekend. Enjoy. Sun is going down a little bit, but hopefully we still have some nice weather, and enjoy mountains, lakes, or what have you. And again, if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask it at the bottom here on the comments, and I will make sure to answer. This will be available for replay as well a little bit later. If you have some friends that couldn't come and want to participate, they can also watch this video on my Facebook page, and I'll be happy to answer their questions as well. So have a great weekend. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for participating. Bye.